Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode, we're talking about how do we have best chances of killing mature bucks during the pre-rut. Where do we set up? How do we set up? What are we looking for? Are we hunting food sources? Are we hunting bedding areas? What are we looking for in these type of areas? Where do we go when that October lull hits that we all hear about, that we all fear as bow hunters? We hear about this every year. The whitetails disappear from the normal areas that we've been seeing them. And where do they go? Do they just lock down? Do they just stay right there? And I'm going to shed some insight into that on what I think they do, where I think they go, and what are your best chances of killing these mature deer before the Orange Army shows up during the rut. My name is Wes. I run the channel DIY Food Plot Pro. I've got a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy. Got a 2,900 acre deer hunting farm in Western Kentucky where we cannot bait. So we rely heavily on food plots to hunt and hold the mature bucks that we're blessed to hunt here in Western Kentucky. Now, food plots are phenomenal. I have food plots on almost every single farm on the outfit, on the 2,900 acres, but not all parts of the season are food plots as critical or as important to whitetails as they are in all the other times. So early season, those food plots are really good. Those soybeans, alfalfa, the clovers, things like that, they really key in on those areas during the early part of the season. But what happens during the pre-rut? You know, we're a month or so away from the actual rut. We always have that time when we get that October lull that you hear about. Whitetails just aren't showing up on the properties. They're not showing up where they were at. Where are they going? What are they doing? Today's episode, we're going to talk about what are your best odds to kill during that pre-rut phase, and where do we hunt that pre-rut phase? This can be kind of tricky for a lot of guys. This changes, and this will be something that you will have to see in your environment. This is what works out well in my area, my environment. So during that pre-rut phase, those bucks are more nomadic, right? They are just kind of roaming the country, putting their sign down. They're putting scrapes everywhere. You go to any crop field, any food plot around here, you'll find a half dozen scrapes at least in every single field and food plot. And you find a good size ag field, and it'll be every 100, 150 yards that you'll find a scrape around the edge of that field. Are those good areas to be hunting early season? In my experience, those areas are not as good or not as productive as some of our other type of areas. Those are more nighttime oriented scrapes on the edges of those fields. And a lot of times during the pre-rut, I'm not interested as much in food unless my cameras are telling me different. And they may very well this year, as we don't have any acorns to speak of hitting the ground this year. So our fall plots may be significantly more attractive this year than what they were, say, last year when we had a tremendous amount of acorns on the ground. I think that's one reason the October lull exists, is because that's the time of year when most of the nuts are dropping. Most of the acorns are dropping. Those whitetails are keying in on those areas. They're not having to move a whole lot because they're feeding and bedding in the same general areas. It makes those deer really difficult to hunt when they are focused in on nuts or acorns, because they're not really having to move a whole lot of places. They bed down, they eat, they bed down again. They got everything they need in those oak flats. There's no real reason for those deer to move. For this year, when we don't have a lot of food sources available to these whitetails through the acorns and nut crop, what are we going to be looking at? Are we going to be hunting food plots? Most years in the October time period, for me, is not a great time to be hunting over food, just because a buck's not patternable. It's very difficult to say that buck's going to be here. Early season in September, you find something that mature buck is interested in, say a soybean or an alfalfa or a clover field, and you can pretty much set your watch by it. He's going to show up. But during the October period, during that pre-rut period, you find that's typically not the case. He may show up one night, and then he may not show up for 2 more weeks. He may show up again in the middle of the day. He's very not patternable during that time period. So how am I setting up to be able to have good success during that period when I'm not having a good pattern on these whitetails on these food plots? This is when the transitional cover really plays a huge dividends for me. So as you can see, we're on an old logging road right here, and this logging road goes down to about a 20-acre soybean field that's going to be green all the way up until a frost. It's heavy soils, wetter soil. The drought's not really bothering it. This is going to be something that's going to be green for a long period of time. So the whitetails are going to key in on that food source. The thing that I like about hunting in areas like this is an all-day hunt. You get a good cold front come through and get bucks on their feet. This type of area is where you can sit all day long and just have an action-packed whitetail hunt. And that's because you're really close to their bedding. We got bedding over here. This is all bedding here, and there's probably 10 to 12 acres of solid bedding on this side of me. This is mature hardwoods. Mainly white oak, a little bit of red oak scattered along, but mainly mature woods, thicket bedding. So being on the edge of this is where I think this really pays off in that pre-rut time as well as in the rut. These are areas where I'm going to be sitting when it's those cold October mornings, and also in November when the rut kicks in, especially when that early rut kicks in and those bucks are really on their feet seeking those first hot does. These are areas that can be absolutely killer and key to harvesting that mature buck before the pressure gets on. I'm shooting this video a little bit early because I don't want to really be in here shooting this during that phase. You can see that we've still got a lot of green foliage around. We're about a month before this is actually going to occur, but I don't want to be in here messing around filming when I want to be in my deer stand hunting when this actually happens. Why is a transitional cover so important? They love being on the edge. They're edge creatures. So you find something that switches. It's a perfect place to hunt. In our case here, we have bedding on this side. We have mature timber on this side. This makes a perfect road right here for these whitetails to kind of key in on and be in here. We've already got some scrapes in here. These were mock scrapes that I built. Obviously the licking branches, you can see one behind me. There's two more behind you there. These are areas that I've had a really good success rate in the past using a little bit of branch butter and getting these established. These are heavy hit areas right outside of bedding that mature bucks feel comfortable coming in daylight. That's the issue with those scrapes that are on the edge of those fields. Those are great places and they're wonderful places for a camera to inventory, but more than likely, those are not places where big bucks are visiting daily during the daylight hours. Those are most often hit during the nighttime hours, and so they're not giving us those good chances to harvest those deer. Now, during the November, during the rut hunt, I'm definitely keying in on more of those larger areas where I can see further and I can get over a lot of scrapes. A lot of does are being in there, but right now, this is kind of that transition period. The does aren't in heat yet. The bucks are still seeking. They're laying their sign down. This is an area where this kind of checks all those boxes. They want to be close to cover, and we want to be close to cover as well. Sometimes that can be difficult setting your farm up to where you're close to cover, but you have great access. My access is 50 yards behind my stand to a field, and I've got Egyptian wheat planted around the entire field. I can get in and out of here without bumping deer, no trouble whatsoever. The deer are going to be bedded here. They're going to come to me. I've got a good wind blowing that way. I've got a good spot for my wind to blow in a dead zone that deer are not going to get behind me here. So I can always keep my wind right hunting this location. And these transitional areas are so key in hunting those mature whitetails early on in the season as they come off of those food sources during the nighttime and they make their way back here during the day. This is an area they feel comfortable in during the entire daylight hours, giving us more action-packed hunting. And also it's going to give us a lot more chances at daylight mature bucks being in here, not just that first 30 minutes of the morning and the first 30 minutes of the evening. This is an all-day set. As the rut kicks in, these bucks are going to do the exact same thing. This is doe bedding as well. They're going to cruise the downwind side of this, which is going to be right here. On days the wind's blowing like this, he can scent check every bit of this before he goes back to bed, or when he's checking for hot does, he can scent check this entire area, feel pretty comfortable doing it, walking through all this cover, and I'm sitting up on the downwind side of him. So if I was to move my stand to the edge of this thicket where I'm right on top of these deer, then all of a sudden he's got my wind. But as I back off this 17 to 20 yards, he can't get my wind here. He's going to be walking right through here, checking this for predators and for hot does. And all of a sudden, I've got a chance to put an arrow in him as he's cruising down through here, checking these scrapes or checking for those does or checking for those predators before he's heading back to bed from our food sources. Kind of how all this kind of stacks in together, from food sources to bedding areas to transitional cover. All this is set up on purpose, okay? And we've got to use this on our farms the best way that we possibly can to help us have the best chances at killing these mature bucks during this October lull period, where we're not seeing the deer on the food plots that we typically were a month or so ago. If you need help setting up your farm, I've got a website set up, www.diyfoodplotpro. You can click on contact us, boots on ground consultation. I'll come to the farm, I'll walk the farm with you, try to help you out, set the food plots up, set the bedding areas up, show you where the stands need to be set up at to be able to harvest these mature bucks during the entire part of the season, not just during the rut. So if that's something that interests you, you can go to www.diyfoodplotpro.com. I'm going all over the US this year. I've already got several scheduled. And so more than likely, I'm going to be in your area at some point during the wintertime starting in January. So I'd love to come out and visit with you and to see what you got going on and try to help you set your farm up where we can raise that bar on that farm to the maximum it possibly can be. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Y'all smash that like and subscribe button.